Hello and welcome back to George Past the Post. This video is going to attempt to briefly explain all the various different ways of electing one candidate, whether it's to a parliamentary constituency or a president on a national level. Well, first, there is of course first past the post, where, as I've tried to explain in various other videos, people vote for one candidate and the candidate with the most votes wins. You don't need a majority of the votes, just more than anyone else. But what are the other methods? Well, there's something called the two-round system. Now this is where, guess what, there is the potential for two rounds, i.e. two elections. In the first round, like with first past the post, people vote for one candidate. The votes are counted, but if nobody has an absolute majority of the votes, i.e. 50% plus one, then the top two candidates go through to the runoff, or the second round. In the runoff, again, people pick between the two candidates, they vote for one, and the candidate with the most votes wins, meaning that the winner has to have an absolute majority of the votes cast. Oh, and if in the first round somebody gets 50% plus one, then they win, and there's no need for a second round. Next, something called supplementary vote. Now, in the UK, this is no more. This was used to elect mayors, including the London mayor, until 2024, when the system was switched to first past the post. Under the supplementary vote, voters could give a first and second choice. So you could put a cross next to your first choice, and then in the second column a cross for your second choice. In other parts of the world, they use numbers instead of crosses. Anyway, under this system, again, if somebody has 50% plus one of the first preference votes, they win. If not, all but the top two candidates are eliminated. And then, of the eliminated candidates, if any of them put as their second choice either of the top two candidates, those votes are transferred to them. I'm glad you're still keeping up. And then basically the first preference votes for the top two candidates are added to any second preference votes, and then the candidate with the highest total is elected. I'm glad you're still with me. That's a form of preferential voting, but there are other forms of preferential voting as well. I touched on this when I talked about Australia. There's preferential voting. This is where, in the case of Australia, in some elections you have to number every candidate in order of preference, but more commonly, voters can number as many or as few candidates as they want. So you can, if in most preferential voting systems, or AV as it's known, the alternative vote, you can just put a 1 if you want, and your vote will be counted. You can express second preference, third preference, and so on if you wish. Now, under preferential voting, again, if somebody has more than 50% of the first preference votes, they win. But if not, the lowest placed candidate is eliminated and their votes are transferred according to the second preferences to the other candidates. And this process continues until somebody has 50% plus one of the votes in the count. The difference between the supplementary vote and either full preferential voting or the alternative vote is that it's possible under AV for a candidate or any of the candidates to be elected. So you don't have to have finished in the top two of the first preferences. So that is a brief summary of, I think we've almost gone for 5 minutes. So that's so we have first past the post, vote for one candidate, the candidate with the most votes wins. Two-round system, people vote. If no one has 50%, the top two candidates go through to the next round. There are countries that do it slightly differently, but that's for another video. But you still have two top two candidates. And then there's the supplementary vote, which is no more in the UK, where it's sort of a hybrid of the two-round runoff and preferential voting, and then you've got preferential voting itself. So there, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I said briefly, we've 5 minutes, but there we go. Hope you have enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.